everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Pulls Pod. Following a week off last week, we come off the back, for once, of a very good victory at the weekend against a team that had won the last five on the road in Boston United. Joining me today, we've got male past and present once again to repeat of December's meeting, if you like, with Robbie Stelling and Sam Lee. Hello, guys. How are we today?
Hi, Jack. All good.
Hello.
Hi,
Sun is shining in Hartlepool.
Absolutely.
lovely to see you both again. As if the return of the Gary Medina and Manny Disarue partnership on Saturday wasn't enough to get Pools fans excited. The male-male partnership being reunited again, Stelling and Lee, that must be a real treat. It's great to see you guys.
The digital partnership rides once again. Very good to see. And we'll dive straight into it because, as we say, it's nice to come in with a positive aspect for once rather than discussing another defeat. And we'll come to you first, Robbie, because obviously you were in the press box on Saturday when we beat Boston by 4-1. It felt like it was deserved from the stands. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, absolutely, Jack. It was a really positive afternoon, and I think it was one actually that Pools fans would have approached with some trepidation. As you alluded to, Boston had won five away games in a row. They'd been absolutely flying, six unbeaten when they arrived at the Prestige Group Stadium as well. I mean, they were sort of dead and buried, weren't they, at the turn of the year? But under Graham Coughlin, they've had a massive resurgence, beat York in January, sorry, and then drew with Barnet, and then went on a really, really impressive run. Obviously, beat Rochdale in midweek prior to coming to Pools at the weekend. And Pools, of course, by contrast, were bang out of form. No win in eight, struggling a little bit in front of goal, perhaps a little bit of a lack of confidence as well. And that run had sort of seen them slide relatively precariously into the bottom half of the table. And I think if we lost on Saturday, there would have been a bit of a panic about the threat of relegation. And given the understandable concern about off-field issues following Raj Singh's resignation, Pools are in a race against time to make sure that they can complete a takeover deal and secure their future. The last thing they wanted to do was get dragged into a relegation battle at the same time. I think now that 3 points, which take them to 49, will be enough. Most fans probably would have just taken a scrappy 1-0 win, wouldn't they? But I think the manner of the performance was really, really pleasing. You look at the team that they were able to field on Saturday, and it does make you think, you wonder how Pools are in the position that they're in terms of the league, because they've got loads of capable players. I mean, that front two, Manny Disaroi, obviously 25 goals last season, 14 this now. Gary Medine, vastly experienced. Anthony Mancini, he always gives both the team and the fans a lift, doesn't he? Such an exciting player, so graceful. I love watching him move with the ball, and he always makes something happen. Obviously, the concern over Mancini is always whether he can stay fit and how long for. Reyes Cleary was really influential as well. Jamie Minley, I thought, had a great game. I actually thought he was probably man of the match. He's growing in stature, and he's one that provides some positivity for the future. So a really important, emphatic performance. I thought what was also telling actually was the reaction of the fans towards Anthony Limbrick. He's obviously been under a little bit of pressure recently. I think there's a lot of fans that would justifiably question some of the decisions he's made in recent weeks. The changes to personnel, the changes to formation, the fact that he left Reyes Cleary on the bench ahead of the defeat at Fylde, the fact that he didn't pick Manny Disarue for 3 weeks in a row. Those were all decisions that I think a lot of supporters would have disagreed with. But the response of fans towards him at the end of the game was overwhelmingly positive. Obviously, they'd had a really big win and an important result, but I think that bodes really well for Anthony Limbrick moving forward. I think back to earlier in the season, the reaction to big wins was a little bit more indifferent, particularly under Darren Sung. I remember that Sutton game at the beginning of October when Pools came from two down to win. The sense was that they'd won in spite of Saul rather than because of him. And obviously, he then came out and made the comment about personal abuse that he felt was being leveled in his direction unfairly. I think Limbrick, rightly, I think Limbrick is certainly seen as a more likable, charismatic, genial figure. And I think that is going to work in his favour. That's probably given him a little bit more leeway among some supporters. Of course, Pools are still going to need to have a strong end to the season, particularly from Limbrick's point of view, if he wants to convince whoever he's meant to be convincing, whether that's Raj Singh, the interim board, or any prospective new owners, that he is the right man to lead the club in the longer term. They will still need a couple more good results, but it was certainly a positive afternoon, a massive result, and at last it felt like a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel after a really miserable run.
Yeah, and some follow-up questions there as well. We'll come to you next, Sam. In terms of, we'll start with Limerick, because that was the last point that you ended on there, Robbie. Has it been a case so far, because he has had his flaws, some selection choices the fans have labelled as baffling for certain degrees. But to an extent, is it not particularly on him? And the reason why I say that is because obviously you've got the uncertainty behind the scenes. Who knows how long this takeover talk, which we'll come on to later on, who knows how long that's been going on for behind the scenes. You've got the shuffling around in February when Lenny Lawrence stepped back, etc. You've also got the players missing 100 chances a game, which certainly doesn't help his belief, because if they took some of their chances, I mean, I said on Saturday it was in joke as well as being realistic, but quite frankly, we could have had close to 100 goals this season, the amount of chances that we've missed. So to sum up, Sam, is Limbrick, has he been sort of treated as a little bit of a fall guy maybe in terms of results, when perhaps if it had been down to the players taking their chances, we may be on a much better footing than we are now?
It is quite difficult to come in at that point of the season, or to take over at that point of the season, isn't it? When we're either sort of pushing for promotion or fighting relegation. We've been in that sort of midpoint, haven't we? Where we have optimism of the playoffs, but not realistically ever thinking that we're going to get there. But we're always looking behind us. But yeah, I think, he's come in, steadied it, and like you say, that result on Saturday was just out of nowhere. I think all of the stars come together at the same time, and yeah, it was great to watch. Fantastic performance, and yeah, good to get the fans back on side at home as well. It must be difficult for the players to sort of see out the season when there's so much uncertainty off the pitch and stuff, and they're starting to play for their careers next season, their contracts, and they're starting to wonder what's going on. But I think it's been difficult, but it always is at Hartlepool.
That's true. And you mentioned there about the supporters. It's good to see the unity back with the players as well. And certainly a performance like that will provide that. It felt like one of the performances of the season. I know that doesn't sound particularly like a high bar to clear, let's say, given the results that we've had, certainly since the turn of the year. But it's a good advert for anyone that potentially could come in to see the club in such a high-spirited performance, in such a high-spirited display.
Yeah, let's hope they were watching on Saturday. And, but yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see who comes in. I'm sure we'll get on to that later on in the podcast, so I won't talk about it now. But yeah, the fans are vital to Hartlepool. The way we perform is very much, dependent on, or should I say, is important. It's important how the fans react. And I do think, I'm one of those fans who believes in positivity from the sidelines all the time. I'm not one to shout and berate them. But yeah, it's good to have something positive to shout about, because we can be a hard bunch to please sometimes.
And Robbie, looking at the game itself, there was a few moments, as I've already mentioned this season, we've struggled to take our chances where we should have been out of sight in games and we've been pegged back. There were a couple of moments in that second half where we missed golden chances. You think of Manny Desirou, where, for example, right in front of goal and somehow seen his effort saved. And there was also a big chance before the third one went in. But on both occasions, which hasn't happened enough this season, we've recycled the ball, we've got it back into the box, and we've got the goal from that. And in the end, that just sort of killed the game off, didn't it? Because Boston didn't have an answer.
Yeah, the one thing I'd just say to add on to Sam's point quickly about Limbrick as well, I think it's a bit of a misconception that from some fans, Sam was, I think, right when she said they were sort of optimistic about the playoffs, but not really that hopeful that it was a genuinely realistic prospect. A lot of fans seem to think that Limbrick has come in and derailed this playoff push that was really gathering momentum. I think it's important to note that Pools hadn't won any of their 4 games prior to Limbrick replacing Lenny Lawrence. They were well beaten by Barnet, and they had a couple of disappointing draws as well at Wealdstone and Braintree. And of course, they were struggling to cope without Anthony Mancini and Joe Gray, who were both so impressive in that win over Oldham on New Year's Day, and then suffered injuries in the intervening period. So I think that that's significant as well. The pleasing thing for me in terms of the chances, Jack, is that Pools are creating chances. You want players to get into goal scoring positions. How often in the first half of the season were we frustrated by the lack of chances that Pools were creating? I mean, this is the National League. You have to accept that players are not going to score every chance that they get. But given the creative talent in the Pools side, not just in that 11, but also on the bench, Adam Campbell obviously won promotion to League One last season. Luke Charman's had some good moments this season. Sam Folarin was a really exciting season, a signing when he arrived in January, hasn't made much of an impact yet. That's true. But Pools have a lot of depth in attacking areas as well. I think one of the reasons in the past that they've struggled to recycle chances is that they don't get enough bodies forward. I think there's been a bit of an imbalance in midfield at times this season. Obviously, last season there was an imbalance in terms of having Callum Cook, Tom Crawford, Nicky Featherstone, all good players in their own right, good on the ball, but not much in the way of a ball winner. Darren Song obviously set about a complete overhaul and signed Jack Hunter, Nathan Sharon, Greg Sloggett, who are destructive players but don't offer that much in terms of creativity. Only 2 goals in 18 league appearances between the three of them. So there hasn't been much coming from midfield. And at times, whether it's Manny Disarue or Gary Medine, especially if they're playing as a lone striker, they've looked pretty isolated. I think it's important that you get players in and around them, get runners beyond them. And obviously, when you have someone like Anthony Mancini, who's so creative, so confident, and so forward thinking and purposeful. And I think Jamie Miley has provided a bit more balance in midfield as well, because he tends to think forward with his passing. That's really significant as well. So the important thing is that Pools create chances. Yes, they're not always going to take them. As you've alluded to, they've missed plenty of chances over the last couple of months since Limbrick replaced Lenny Lawrence. But the fact that they're creating them is a really good sign. Sam was talking about the fans. I mean, the home fans haven't seen that much to get excited about, have they, this season? I think 9 times at home this season, Pools have failed to score. I mean, that is a mind-boggling statistic, especially given the fact that I think they scored 72 goals last season. I think they're on 44 this season with 7 games to go. You can see that there's been a significant drop-off, albeit there has been an improvement at the opposite end of the pitch. Pools have been more difficult to play against defensively. But the fact that they're creating chances certainly bodes well. And I think that chimes with Anthony Limbrick's footballing philosophy as well. He wants Pools to get on the front foot. He wants them to dominate the ball a little bit more, be a little bit more attacking. I saw Dave Challoner earlier in the season, and obviously it was a difficult time for Pools. He said the one thing that any manager has got to do at Hartlepool United to succeed is to get on the front foot, because then you're going to get the fans behind you, and then it can be such a massive asset. I remember some of those games in the Challoner era, turning up to the game when the atmosphere was red hot. It almost felt impossible for Pools to lose. So if you can get the fans on side, that's going to be a massive, massive boost. And obviously, one of the ways you can do that is by getting on the front foot right from the off. And I think Saturday, probably more than any other game since New Year's Day, Pools managed to do that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We've scored 48 and conceded 49 in the league, so it was 44 before Saturday. And if you look at the table and where how many teams have scored, etc., there's a couple of exceptions below us who have scored more, but they've also conceded a lot more as well. It does look as though we're in a kind of the right position, if you like, in the table, given the amount of goals and we've scored and conceded. I mean, there was a XG, and I know a lot of people don't put faith in XG. A lot of people see it as a valuable resource. I'm a bit on the fence with it, to be fair, because I'm not entirely sure how much value it places. But there was an XG table. I think it was around mid-February when we had our little spell. I think it was 3 home games in a row. And that table came out, and our expected goals put us third or fourth, where I think we were about eighth or ninth at the time, and we hadn't taken the chances. And as you say, it's a lower league. The quality isn't necessarily going to be there as it would be in a higher league. But you look at the attacking force that we've got, we should be scoring more goals than we are. It does feel that way. I mean, I might be wrong. Sam, am I wrong?
No, I would expect, us to be high scoring, us to be in a positive goal advantage at the moment. Obviously, Desiree's goals are crucial to us. It's probably the service that we need to give him that we're struggling with at the moment. You give him the ball and we will be the goal tally is going to be higher up, but at least like Robbie says, we're not conceding as many, and our defense has been pretty decent. Obviously playing Boston on Saturday was a time when we really didn't want to play them, because when you're fighting for your lives, that's the last time you want to, that's the least when you want, oh gosh, I can't get my words out now. That is not the time when you want to play a team like Boston, is it? When they're in form and they're fighting to stay in the league. But we really pulled off a performance. And if we take that as a starting point now to go forward, no, I don't think the playoffs are realistic from going forward. Obviously, they're still mathematically realistic, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I think, yeah, if we can look now to next season and start looking at who we can acquire, who we can keep, would Featherstone is I don't know what his contract's looking like. Are we losing Nicky at the end of the season again, or will he be staying? Or
I think he was on a year, wasn't he? Robbie, you might have more insight on this than me, but I think he was on a year. I think there was four, wasn't there, that was contracted beyond the end of this season. I think Limbrick's mentioned it before.
So, as I understand it, Jamie Marley and Sam Folarin are contracted beyond this season for next
Yep.
season. Obviously, Tom Parks and Adam Smith as well, they've signed new deals. I
Right.
understand that there are other players who have already committed their futures. I don't know who they are, but there are more than just the four. Nicky's contract is up this summer, but I would be pretty confident that he's going to sign a new one that to continue in his player coach role for next season.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the progression there in terms of him moving into the coaching role full time rather than player at some point in the near future. Because, I mean, you've had your moments before with players where you've accused them of being a bit old and maybe it's a bit past it, and I don't particularly want to do that with Nicky Featherstone. But he is getting on now, and you would suggest that in the near future he probably will move into the sort of Anthony Sweeney role where he's was the player, he's become the coach, and hopefully it goes well for him. And it's we spoke on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, not you two, but we spoke on the podcast a few weeks ago when the news first broke about Raj, saying it's a difficult time for the players in terms of their future, because it's very difficult to sign a contract with a club that, although we hope for the best and fingers crossed it will happen, and some are very confident that it will happen, it'd be very difficult to sign a long-term contract with a club that may not be here in the near future.
yeah, that's always the difficult one, isn't it? Like, who are they? Is Raj actually putting contracts together now? Because if he is walking away at the end, I'm told he definitely is walking away at the end of the season. So, who's going to be, how can he offer contracts beyond the end of the season, knowing that he personally isn't here? How, it's going to be difficult for players signing them. That uncertainty is not good at a time around now when you're keeping and releasing players and you're looking to bring new ones in, and you're trying to set a playing budget as a manager for next season. It's a difficult time for them, but we are optimistic about. Well, certainly Hartlepool United. I don't care what anyone says. Hartlepool United will be around forever. um, we'll all chip in together if we have to. But yeah, like it is difficult to nail what we're going to be looking at next season. But yeah, we should talk about what that's going to look like soon. But it is. I mean, who says is Limerick going to be able to buy players before Raj goes, or put in or have a playing budget or look at players? Is he going to? How many is he going to release? That's what we're going to be looking at the end of the season.
Just to chip in on that, I don't know, but I would be surprised if they're in a position at the minute to negotiate any more contracts. They might be able to do it in theory or in principle, but I would assume that if Raj is not going to fund the club beyond the end of the season until there has been a legally binding
Mhm.
takeover, then I would imagine that pools are not in a position to commit to funds for next season that they don't have. So that obviously is a difficult position to be in. And I think realistically, whatever happens, you're probably going to be chasing your tails at least to an extent over the summer. I mean, presumably Anthony Limbrick, Gavin Skelton, and the rest of the coaching staff will still have an idea of the players that they would like to bring in. But I would imagine that a lot of clubs will already be entering into negotiations and discussions with some of their targets ahead of next season. And in an ideal world, that would have been what pools are doing as well. But given the fact that there's obviously the off-field uncertainty, and we think there's going to be a change in the ownership, I would think that pools probably are not in a position to do that. So it might be a challenging summer in that regard. I mean, if you look at someone like Southend, who had a similar situation last season, albeit a far more severe one. Obviously, Ron Martin was the previous owner, and he had taken the club into a difficult financial situation, a really precarious financial situation. And I think whether you're a fan of Raj Singh or a critic, the one thing that you would agree that the club is currently in a better financial position than when he took over at the end of the 2017-18 season, when they were genuinely faced with the threat of administration and even potential liquidation and footballing oblivion. So I think that if Raj were to leave in the next couple of months, that would probably be his crowning achievement. Obviously, there was the promotion in 2021, the FA Cup run, the run to the semi-finals of the EFL Trophy, as well as some fantastic memories on the pitch, albeit in a sense we are in some ways back to where we started after that relegation in 2023. The fact that we're on a far firmer financial footing, it is really, really significant, I think.
It's certainly attractive to people who may be coming in, the fact that we are in a better position now than we were in 2018. I think, and I know that obviously there are a lot of NDAs flying around, and if anyone knows anything, they keep them stum, and I completely understand that for the time being, particularly in the current climate, the way that, as you've said, Sam, he should be walking away at the end of the season, but he's said this before. So we can only go off his word at the moment. And Robbie, I'm not trying to trap you in any way, because unfortunately your predecessor got banned from the ground before, so we know that these things can happen. So I promise not to try and trap you. But in terms of the general feel, without describing anything specific, is the signs positive, negative? Are you hearing anything in terms of the broader sense of how this might go?
I feel positive, Jack. It's difficult, isn't it? A lot of what we hear is rumor and speculation. Inevitably, there's always going to be rumor and speculation that surrounds a football club, be that on and or off the pitch. And obviously, that's massively heightened given the current situation. So it's difficult to know what to believe and what not. I would agree with Sam that it does feel like Raj is genuinely serious about leaving at the end of the season. And that's obviously a massively significant thing, because there have been previously people interested in the purchase of the club, albeit in his statement that he released a couple of weeks ago, he suggested that they were time wasters. Obviously, that's up to people to make their own minds up over whether that really was the case. I did think it was a sort of unusually bullish statement, but that's obviously by the by to an extent. I think the fact that he resigned the chairmanship is significant. When he first put the club up for sale in April 2023, we obviously had that interview. It was in light of the Crawley game, wasn't it, when defeat effectively condemned Pools to relegation back to the National League. When he suggested that some of the criticism levelled at him, particularly in the second half of that game, had made his position untenable. That was again the word he used a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it? He said personal abuse and misrepresentation of information had made his position untenable. But I think it was far more apparent after that Crawley game. But after that announcement, that interview, nothing really happened, did it? There was no suggestion that the club were actively looking to make a takeover possible, or to bring about the sale of the football club. It seemed as though it was sort of up for sale, but was it really up for sale? And I think people over the last 24 months have had huge questions of whether Raj Singh is genuinely serious about the sale of the club. A lot's changed. Obviously, this is a significant point for the football club. They obviously lost their solidarity payments the minute they were relegated from League Two, but they're going to lose their 2-year parachute payments this summer as well. National insurance increases. I think you could argue that the club next season is going to be more expensive to run. There are obviously issues with the pitch as well. That's probably going to need significant investment over the summer too. So it might be that Raj Singh genuinely believes he's taken the club as far as he can. And although the resignation of the chairmanship, I would suggest, is mainly a symbolic thing, it's out there in the public domain. Everyone now knows that he is resigned as chairman in quite a public way. It was sort of a detailed and very emotive statement that he released a couple of weeks ago. So I think that would be far more difficult to backtrack on were he to change his mind. So I don't feel that Raj Singh is going to change his mind. With that in mind, the next challenge is obviously to attract suitable investors who have the financial resources, not just to complete a deal that satisfies Raj Singh, but also to support the club and make the club successful over the coming years. For all that people have criticised Raj over the last couple of years for a perceived lack of ambition and vision, I would suggest at times that's probably justifiable. But sometimes there's been a criticism of a perceived lack of investment as well. I would point out that it's a very financially it's financially demanding to run a football club, even in the fifth division of English football. It's an incredibly expensive thing to do. So Raj obviously has committed a lot of money to the development of the club. The big challenge now is to get a deal over the line. The interim board, who rather cryptically have remained anonymous, so I think we have a fair idea that some of the previous board members, as well as the likes of Lee Russ, Joe Monks, and Rose Stoker, are making up that board at the minute. I think they released a really positive statement. I think the communication was really welcome. It was sensibly worded. And obviously, within that statement, they made the suggestion that they are enthusiastic about the potential of a deal and that talks have already begun. That's hugely positive. I think Sam would agree with me here that sometimes people find that sometimes people are inclined to suggest that there's not that much that would attract an investor to Hartlepool United. But I would tend to disagree. Even Saturday's game against Boston, bearing in mind we've had such a difficult season, there was a little bit of a sign of just how good things can be, particularly the celebrations at the end. Hartlepool United have one of the biggest, most dedicated and passionate fan bases outside the Football League. And obviously they make themselves very much known and heard when they are in the Football League as well. That has to be, I think, the number one selling point, that there's a fantastic fan base. And because of that, this club has real, genuine potential, certainly to be a League Two club, if not a little bit better, if things were to go really, really well. So there is potential there. I think there is potential for this club to do better than they're doing at the moment. So that must be attractive, presumably, to an investor. Obviously, as you alluded to, Jack, I would imagine that there are going to be lots of NDAs. Now, I think in general, the fact that there's not no news, but the fact that there's not a lot of things being put into the public domain, it is probably a positive thing. I don't think you want people to go shouting about rumors or hearsay, etc., etc. I think you want things to be confined to a certain number of important people who are going to have to make the decisions, sign the contracts, and so on and so forth. And if all goes well, I'm pretty confident that the sale of the club will be completed. And then who knows what future we're going to look forward to, but let's hope it's going to be a positive one.
Indeed. I mean, there's a couple of points there. Firstly, you mentioned about the message from the interim board in the aftermath of the statement, which, I mean, why they would choose that week of all weeks when I was in Paris on Thursday was hilarious. Honestly, every time I tried to go somewhere on a weekend, something happens. If it's not London and Lenny Lawrence stepping down, it's Raj selling the club and, the interim board being put in. But that message from the interim board was very well worded. It felt like a positive statement to put out there in terms of, where they felt the club was going to go and the prospects that it had. Secondly, you mentioned the fan base as well. Obviously, they speak for themselves particularly when the club is going well, as you would expect from all clubs. But even when it's not, the away fans that are taken to all ends of the country, given that we're in the far north, it is excellent to anyone watching. And we've shown before the prospects for the club in getting to League One and being that close to the Championship and getting cheated out of it by a corrupt referee. The less said about that, the better. But the fact that we even got there, it shows that the clubs can do it. If you look at clubs who have gone up from the National League recently, they stay in League One. They tend to build on what they've got. You look at Chesterfield and Bromley, who went up last season. They're looking excellent in the league this season. They may not go up straight away. They don't have to go up straight away. You look at clubs like Stockport, who did go up straight away, and Wrexham, of course, have had the money pumped into them as well. It's there. I mean, you've got Walsall, who have fallen off slightly, admittedly, in the last few months, but no one had them anywhere near the promotion places at the start of the season. And it shows you that any team in League Two's never been that much different to the National League in terms of the quality, particularly bottom half of League Two, where anyone could come down. And if you can get out of this league, which is obviously easier said than done, then there is scope for progression there as well. Sam, again, I know NDAs, etc., don't want to trap you, etc., but is there anything on your end that perhaps backs up what we've spoken about already?
Don't worry, I haven't signed any, Jack. I can say whatever I like.
Fair enough.
I don't. Well, I have spoken to people sort of around the club and around the situation who firstly said Raj is definitely going. And I think, like Robbie says, that statement was definitely one that it's hard to backtrack on. He's talked about sort of personal attacks and things like that, and he's had enough. So, fair enough, he's walking away. Obviously the situation is who is going to take over and what will be the how will they take over, and how, with regards to how much it's going to cost them to take over, how much it's going to cost them to take the club forward. I think we need somebody with passion, definitely. Now, whether that's somebody who has a passion for Hartlepool United and lots of money would be ideal. But a passion for football and a passion to take a football club like Hartlepool, which has probably a solid fan base of about 5,000. Should we, you can get 5,000 through the door quite comfortably, and more if we're doing well. A passion to grow a football club or Hartlepool United in general. And because it does have a lot of potential, if you look at it as a commercial proposition, and I have been into the club previously and looked at all its commercial viability, and there's a lot of scope for doing more things to create money, to generate money for the football club. We are still very basic in it, we'll sell pies and lagers and shirts, and that's about it. There's a whole world of AI, there's a whole world of, like, we looked at various green screens, we looked at how we could look at, like, sort of a mix zone for fans and players to go in, how we could capture the pre and post match economy. We surveyed about 3,000 fans of where to go before the match. There's a lot of capability of actually generating this into a good business. So anybody with a business head could certainly make a financial case for making this money. And if anybody wants it, I have a lovely marketing strategy. If anyone wants to come in and buy the club, that you can have off me. But in terms of, like, I mean, I went through this before with the previous administration when Raj took over. As a few people know, I've tried to bring Chris Musgrave into the club, and that was literally just picking up the phone to the nearest millionaire and asking if he fancied buying a football club. And I got to see how much it costs to run the club, and you're right. We were looking at the time around the region, if I remember rightly, of about 200 grand a month to run pools. When we're in League Two. Now, that is obviously a lot of money, and a lot of that, well, obviously, the majority of that is on wages and things like that. Now, there've been cuts, but Raj has put a lot of money into the club. Now, how much, as with all chairmen, as with all businessmen, these things are loans to the football club. So it's how much he wants to take back out, how much he's prepared. He will probably know he's going to need to take some kind of arrangement where, if we don't get a couple of Hollywood millionaires through the door, then he's probably not going to get his money up front. If it's an agreement whereby, if we do, like he gave the previous owners, John Blackledge, I know he put 1.8 million into the club, and I'm going to guess he got around a quarter of that back over a period of 3 or 4 years. So I'm thinking, I think Raj will want a lot more than a 25% of his money back. And I don't know how much he's put in, but say, for example, it's a comparable number. How much he's going to be prepared to lose, how much he's going to sign off, and how much he's going to look at recouping up front. So that will determine who takes over, I suppose, on the money front. Now, as he said that he's definitely stepping down, he's going to have to accept something at the end of this season, and he's going to have to be ready to maybe not be, I'll use the word stubborn because I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but when he and this is all me if he's listening, don't ban anyone else.
Innocent dissemination. Forgot that my mic was on mute there. Bit of Ipso, if anyone knows about Ipso.
But yeah, it's gonna be a delicate negotiation, and I don't want to railroad anything on that front. But I do think, like Robbie said, he's come in and he's kept the club afloat. He's taken it to a promotion, obviously, albeit we went down again. He's taken us on a great cup run. He has injected money into this football club and will have got a lot of earache in the process. So we have to bear in mind that he has done something good for this football club. It is time, and it's possibly been time for a while to move on. Who will come forward? Now that's where it gets really interesting. Now I like Robbie, and I think Robbie probably knows more than me these days. But I have heard of a couple of groups of people who the club are talking to at the moment. I honestly don't know the names of those people. But I've asked if it's I asked if it was somebody to excite the board, and was told, yeah, there was some exciting prospects that are in negotiations with the club at the moment. So that was a positive. And yeah, I think we need to get the deal done sooner rather than later because of all those things we talked about on the pitch. We're going to have to look at contracts for players. We're going to have to look at bringing in new players. We're going to have to look at how much it's going to cost to move forward, investment in the ground, things like that. So yeah, I'm hoping that it's done sooner rather than later, and I'm hoping it's positive news. But I have a good feeling about it, even though I don't know the answer. I'm going to go away and make it my business to find out who it is. I'll let you know. Yeah, I'm pretty confident on the people I've spoken to that they're optimistic about the people who are in now. That's as best as I can do because I don't know.
Fair enough. I mean, I've spoken on the pod before about, you mentioned business opportunities, etc. And I don't have a particular marketing strategy in mind. I don't think I'm that way minded. I think I'll stick to media rather than marketing, in my opinion. But it feels like the Millhouse is the opportunity for anyone coming in. If I know the Millhouse Leisure Centre is still operating at the moment, but you've got the new highlight building on the marina, that Millhouse Leisure Centre, the car park that's there. You've got the skate parks, which I know kids use and it's quite popular. But at the end of the day, like all of that area there, you could look at potentially a fan zone there. You could look at potentially training facilities in house instead of having to traipse up to Durham all, every day for training there. I'm sure Robbie wouldn't mind saving his petrol money going up to Maiden Castle every day. I know it's not the worst journey in the world. To be fair, I've done it for Durham women's games quite a few times, and it's all right. But just keep it in the town. It'd be nice to save the petrol money there. And it just feels like that sort of thing. If the council were able to come to the table and any owners who came in were able to convince the council to do that sort of thing and put it, and the stadium as well, obviously, we're renting the stadium. I'm going to assume, and I don't know anything about business, but I'm assuming that's quite a big part of running the club is paying that rent as well. It just feels like there are so many opportunities there, like in the area, that potentially could be expanded upon.
I think with regards to it's a long-term lease that the club has off the county. It was like a 99-year lease. I don't know what it looks like now. I don't think the rental is actually that high to the council because the council need the football club as much as the football club need the council, I think. And I have actually been in several meetings over probably the last decade or so about things called the Millhouse Master Plan, where we had everything from Millhouse Baths being relocated to underneath Victoria Park to the Millhouse side, where you say having a hotel attached to it. That ground, that land around Millhouse, it'd be interesting, like you said, that is an interesting proposition. And funnily enough, that is what with John Blackledge and Pam Duxbury, they were looking into how they can utilize, package up that ground around. Obviously, it doesn't belong to them, but how it could be packaged up, and possibly it's a I don't want to say council owned land, it's public owned land managed by the council. Council don't own it.
Yeah.
We own it as people. But how that land could be utilized, could we get a nice hotel built there? Because we certainly need one in the town. Could we have facilities like training facilities? There's a bit of land to the side of it. It's more housing. I'm guessing the council has it earmarked for social housing. However, could we be a bit more creative with it? And can we, like say, look at hotels, casinos, leisure facilities, training grounds? We've also got the use of Greyfields. Greyfields is owned by FC Hartlepool now, or it has a 25-year lease on Greyfields. Could we develop that as a part of that as a training ground for Hartlepool United, which can then be used by the community rather than using Durham University's grounds and stuff? If we had a bit of vision and a bit of a thought and a bit of creativity, there is so much we could do, because the football club is so beneficial. A positive, a football club that's doing well is so beneficial to its town on so many different levels, that if we brought these sort of groups together with a bit of thought, with a cash injection, a bit of thought and a bit of thinking outside the box a bit, then we could really go places as a club. But who knows? I'm trying to be positive and say council in the same sentence.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure that Robbie's mind is still focused on the petrol money that he might save if it's in the town. But is that something potentially that, because it will benefit the community as well? You're looking at things like training facilities, potentially the Greyfields being developed. It will go back into the community. You could see, for example, schools using the facilities on a night time, perhaps. I know when I was at school, more than a decade ago now, that's horrible to say. But when I was at school, we used to go out for swimming baths, for example, especially in primary school. There was a swimming baths elsewhere we'd use for those facilities. It'd be things like that where, if for example, the fields were unplayable at the schools, etc., if it's been raining and all that, you could potentially use the training facilities there. There are things that could potentially go on. And Robbie, it just feels like an opportunity that could be explored more, particularly with people who have the facilities and the money to be able to develop those.
Yeah, I think there are definitely loads of opportunities there. I think Sam really articulated that well. I think just to pick up on one of Sam's points in terms of the relationship between the football club and the town, I think that is so significant. Often the success of both are almost inextricably linked. And obviously, as a southerner who's moved to live in Hartlepool just over a year ago now, it feels to me like as a club, Pool's just about more than any other club, there's that link between the people and the football club. The result of the team on a Saturday afternoon is so significant, even on a week by week basis, to the general feeling of the town and the community. Because at its heart, it still really is a community club. It's the people that make Hartlepool United what it is. It's the people that have been season ticket holders for 50 years. It's the young children going to their first game. It's the lads and ladies in the northwest corner that create a fantastic atmosphere. It's the people that have been watching from the town end, for 3 generations that make it so special. I think it's really important to tap into that. Obviously, there was the Her Game 2 game a couple of weeks ago. Things like that are so important. And obviously, we want the club to be successful in the short term, just as on the playing side of things. But I think the club will be genuinely successful and healthy if Sam used the word vision. That's so significant. Obviously, whoever does come in, assuming a deal is completed, their first priority is probably going to be focusing on next season, getting a playing squad together that they think is going to be competitive, and probably addressing the issues with the pitch. But I think a longer term view would be really significant, and that obviously extends beyond the remit of just the playing staff. That there's so much untapped potential, I think, you feel surrounding the club, And I think for any new owner, that has to be appealing because there's certainly things that they can exploit. And I think that's something that definitely will attract.
And finally, moving ahead to Saturday, our next game is a rather tricky game away at playoff chasing Halifax. I don't know if you've both seen the story that's come out recently in the last couple of days about their potential Gateshead situation, let's call it. As
Mm.
Gateshead were in last season, they've now solved that problem, so they will be able to compete for EFL state. I mean, to be fair, they're doing their best to get themselves out of EFL status because they've lost quite a few on the bounce now, and I mean, I don't know if you've seen those two goals that they conceded against Tamworth. My God, I've never. And bearing in mind, I've watched Pools for 25 years. Those goals were horrific to concede, especially the first one. The header was such a, let's say, soft header, and it looped over him. But anyway, Halifax seem to be in a similar situation where the ground is currently in the process of being sold to, I believe, the rugby league team. I think that's right.
Yeah.
And they're currently in the position the Gateshead were in, where they may not be, they may not have a home, etc. There are uncertainties, and as it stands, they may not be able to compete in the playoffs, as Gateshead were not allowed to last season. They're currently fifth, I believe, and we are recording this on Tuesday, so there are some games on tonight. Halifax are away at Woking, and by the time this is published, we'll know the results of that. A couple of others there. Rochdale are at home to York. That's quite a good game to look at as well. Boston, who we've been speaking about, are home to Southend. Altrincham are at home to Solihull. And Wealdstone are at home to Aldershot as well there. And Halifax, tricky on paper, but it would be just like Pools, wouldn't it, to go to Halifax in the playoffs, looking to chase the playoffs and turn them over, wouldn't it, Robbie?
Yeah, well, just to touch on the issue with the ground, as I understand it, I think the gentleman's called Ken Davey, who's trying to buy the Shay. He is the owner of Huddersfield Giants, the rugby league team. They're having a new ground developed. They obviously need somewhere to play their matches. Halifax already share the ground with another rugby league team, Halifax Panthers. And I believe the EFL regulations state that you cannot share your ground with more than one other team. So, although Halifax have already applied for promotion, I think the deadline's the end of November. Obviously, if there is a change, the season that they've had another really strong season under Chris Millington, haven't they? Finished in the playoffs last season, finished fifth, are in fifth now, as you say. Again, I don't think they have necessarily the biggest budget in the league, but they've had a strong season. But they've had a couple of really bad results, haven't they? I think they've lost their last two games without scoring. They've had plenty of injuries. I was watching an interview with Chris Millington this morning, actually. We've mentioned the problems with the pitch at the Prestige Group Stadium. I think they've had some real issues with their playing surface as well. He was making the case that has led to a lot of injuries within their playing squad because they go from playing on firmer pitches elsewhere to the pitch at the Shea, which I think is really cut up and difficult to play on. So they've had a load of injuries. Sam Johnson, their goalkeeper, got injured on Saturday. Massively experienced goalkeeper, I think closing in on 400 appearances for Halifax. I think the replacement, it was his senior debut on Saturday when he came on to replace him. So I think it's probably actually, we spoke about it not being a good time to play Boston. I think it probably is a good time to play Halifax. And like you say, they go to Woking tonight. That's obviously a significant trip as well from West Yorkshire all the way down to Surrey in midweek. And it's relentless, the National League, isn't it? Especially when you've got something to play for, you've got so much on the line. I think they've got a 6 point cushion at the moment on Southend, who are eighth.
That's
So they
correct.
might, yeah, they might feel as though they're in pretty much pole position. But I think Pools will go there fancying their chances, particularly given some of the off-field issues. I mean, Sam was talking at the beginning of our conversation about how the off-field uncertainty, no matter how much you try and stick to the line, oh, it's business as usual, let's focus on the football. Uncertainty in whatever, guys, cannot be helpful for the playing staff, whether it's concerns over what kind of contract they're going to get next season or concerns over whether they're going to be able to compete in the playoffs in 6 to 8 weeks' time, something they've worked the entire season for. I think they have given all their injuries, they're currently fielding a really young team. Halifax, obviously, Chris Millington is an experienced coach. He'll know how to cope with that, but certainly possibly a good time to play them. And Pools will hope that they've got a little bit of momentum, obviously, after Saturday's game. They've struggled, Pools, haven't they, to string wins together this season. It just feels like every time there's a a positive result, be that the win over Oldham on New Year's Day, the win over Sutton in Anthony Limbrick's first game in charge, it sort of turns out to be a bit of a false dawn, and they never are able to quite back that up. So it's significant from a Pool's perspective, albeit they are probably going to finish in mid table. I think it's very unlikely they're going to go down, and I think it's almost impossible they're going to finish in the playoffs. They will want to finish the season strongly, whether that's to build a bit of momentum going into next season. Obviously, a number of players potentially playing for their futures. Anthony Limbrick will need some good results to make sure he's in the dugout next term as well. And for any prospective owners, I think a winning team, a successful team, will obviously potentially be significant in terms of how attracted they are to Pools. So a difficult game on paper without a doubt, but potentially one I think that Pools might feel as though they can go and win.
Yeah, just to point out there as well, you mentioned about us being unable to string wins together. We've only won back-to-back games once this season. That was the 4-3 away at Solihull and the 2-0 win at home to Fylde in November. That is the only time that we've been able to string wins together. We've had a couple of unbeaten runs, but in terms of actual victories, it's been few and far between. Even when we had our, let's say, decent start to the season, we weren't able to string wins together, which at the end of the day probably did for Darren Sarll as much as anything else. Sam, it feels like obvious to say, but it is one of those where every win can only be helpful to people who may be watching from afar.
Yeah, there's no real pressure on the players now, is there? We're not going down, we're not going up, and they've nothing really to play for in terms of the league, I'd say. However, they've got a new manager still to impress. There'll be players wanting to, if not impress for Hartlepool, then impress for a move away from Hartlepool. So personally, they should be wanting to play out the season as best that they can. And again, like just what Robbie was saying, playing for the club and playing for the fans and playing for wherever new owners come in, the uncertainty might also work in the favour of they don't know who they're going to be impressing. So the only way they can see this is there's no pressure on them. Go out and enjoy the football and play the best they can for wherever career they want ahead of them.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, Robbie, I assume you are going down. Obviously, it's one of those where, yeah, as you say, it's one of those on paper where they're in the playoffs and it could go either way. But as you mentioned, they do have their own issues, and fingers crossed for a positive result there. You mentioned about the pitch as well. I mean, I've been a few times, and I don't think I've ever seen it in, let's say, relatively good condition. It's usually been the result of the rugby league playing on it, and it just ends up being a bit of a marshland. Have you been to Halifax before?
Yes, I have, not in my capacity as a Hartlepool Mails reporter, but I've been there as a fan a few years ago. I only have a vague memory of it, but I'm fairly sure we lost. So
We probably did, yeah. I mean, I went when Nicky Featherstone scored from about 25 yards out in the top corner. We won that 2-1. That was when we took 2000. I went. It wasn't the Craig Harrison one because we lost 2-0 there and he got sacked the next day. But I didn't go to that one. I went to the one at the start of a season and we lost 2-0. But like I said, I think every time I've been there, the pitch hasn't been in the best state. Is it up there with the worst pitches you've possibly seen?
oh, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, it
I
is,
mean,
especially at this level of the pyramid.
yeah, well, we were talking before we came on, weren't we? The pitches at National League level, they tend to be there's a bit of a division, isn't there? Probably more so than you get in the Football League in terms of the quality. Pools, obviously, the pitch for a long time was sort of the pride of the town, wasn't it? We were discussing Dave Brown, the head groundsman. He won Groundsman of the Year a couple of times. Pools have won all sorts of accolades for their pitch, which is perhaps one of the reasons why the condition that it's currently in it is so disappointing and so difficult for some fans to accept. We've been to some good pitches recently. Sutton was really good. I believe they
It was,
share
yeah.
their pitch with the West Ham ladies team or something like
That's
that.
right, yeah.
So they get some investment from West Ham as well. So that was a really, really nice pitch. We went to Fylde recently. I was saying to you, I like Fylde. I think it's a really nice little ground. I think there's some really good people there, but there was a lot of sand on the pitch the day that we went there. I mean, I said to Anthony Limbrick, I wonder whether this reminds him of Bondi Beach. There was that much sand, so that was a really interesting pitch. I don't know, but I would imagine that probably sharing it with a rugby league team I guess that means there's just double the wear and tear on the pitch. So you would assume that that would be significant. And if it hasn't been great for a number of years, then perhaps that's a problem. And again, I don't know. I'm just speculating here, but I wonder if that's why the EFL regulation is that you can't share your pitch with more than one other team. And I think the regulation actually makes specific reference to rugby. So I wonder if that's significant as well. Look, it's such an old adage that it is the same for both teams. I think the fact that the pitch at the Prestige Group Stadium has been bad has affected pools a lot because they're almost anticipating having to take another touch. There's that, I don't want to use the word fear, but there's certainly that sort of tentativeness instilled, particularly in some of the creative players. But obviously, pools do have experience on playing in on all sorts of different type of pitches. So I don't think either Chris Millington or Anthony Lambert will be looking to use that as an excuse. And I've really danced around your question here, Jack, haven't I? There are all sorts of different pitches. I certainly don't think Halifax is one of the better ones.
Yeah, that's true. I think, to be fair, it's important to point out for my own peace of mind that it's Crystal Palace who play at Sutton and not West Ham, because I'll get into trouble with a lot of women's football supporters for that, given that obviously I've done quite a few games. I think West Ham, if memory serves me right, I think West Ham played at Dagenham. I
That's
think
my
Tottenham.
terrible geography coming
Yeah,
through there.
I think Dagenham. Sorry, yeah, I think West Ham played Dagenham. I think Tottenham play at Leyton Orient. And I've got Crystal Palace up because as soon as I said West Ham, I said, yeah, that's right. I thought, is it? Because I seem to remember like a sign when I was at Sutton saying like home of Sutton and Crystal Palace, and obviously I've had a look, and so don't come out with the pitchforks, women's football fans, because particularly with how Crystal Palace are going as well, obviously promoted to the Women's Super League, and hopefully they stay up as well. Right. I think that'll bring us to a close because I believe that Robbie's got plans later on. So we'll let him get ready for those. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me this week. And hopefully we do bring 3 points home from Sutton. Halifax, honestly. It's because I've still got the page up for Sutton on my phone. I was looking directly at it. That was silly. Yes, so hopefully we'll bring 3 points home from Halifax. And if the recording that I've got set for Monday morning comes off, and I'll be able to announce the ex-player that I've got coming on Monday next week. But I've learned from before, and I'm not announcing anything before it's happened in case of postponements and all that stuff. But thank you very much, guys, and hopefully we will see you, if not this season, then next season when we still have a club. Cheers, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks, Jack.
guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.